motion axis with x horizontal axis, z or y vertical axis. So in motion axis, the thumb, index and the middle finger, one hand can be used to assist in recalling these three axes of spinal motion. In previous video, we dropped our discussion about the motion axis, in which we only talked about the whole axis of the motion axis. So we have x, y and z axis. X is also known as horizontal, y is vertical. X uh, actually x or horizontal axis, which shows us the side bending and the rotation about the so vertical and y axis. Next, the thumb and the middle finger on the hand can be used to assist in recalling these three axes of the spinal motion. The thumb pointing to the ceiling represent the y or vertical axis. The middle finger flexed to 90 degrees at the metacarpophageal joint represents the x-axis, and the index finger at the right angle to the middle finger directed anteriorly represent the xyz axis. So in figure 1 shows us the three vertebral motion axes reprinted with the permission from DD. Next, represent figure 1 2 shows us the manual illustration of three cardinal axes. Up next, one of the most important rule of the superior motion. What are the rules of the superior motion? So when the manual therapist describes the segmental motion, it is understood that the superior vertebra in the is mentioned first. For example, side bending right at the T5 or T6 motion segment suggested that the fifth thoracic vertebra, which is known as T5, is side bending right on T6. Most often, this will be documented at T5 or T6 side bending right. However, some clinical clinicians may describe this in the short form as T5 side bending right. When only one vertebral level is noticed, it denoted the segment's motion is not under the level above but rather over the level below. So consequently, T5 sides bending the right refer to its motion relative to T6, and L4 rotation left in its motion relative to L5. So this is the case whether spinal motion is initiated from above down or from below up. For example, the trunk rotation that is initiated by rotating the lower extremities and pelvis to the right and proceeding up to and including T8 is still described as T7, and T8 rotation left the virtue of the fact that T7 is left rotated relative to T8. Up next, we have the rule of vertebral body motion. So vertebra's motion is always described by the direction of vertebral body motion and non-spinous process, which stands for SP movement, consequently a passive movement of T11. SP to the left, which include vertebral rotation to the right, is described as T11 and 12 rotation right because of the direction of the vertebral body motion. We have type 1 and type 2 impairments. Type 1 also known as neutral impairment, and type 2 is known as non-neutral impairment. So type 1, restricted spinal motion involving three or more segments in a neutral position of the trunk is referred to as type 1, or neutral impairment, like such that dysfunction. For example, in a neural trunk position, a restriction in left side bending from T9 through T12 is associated with a restriction at the same level in right rotation. Its position can often be described on the anterior posterior spinal radiograph. For example, scoliosis. Type 2 restricted spinal motion of one segment is a non-neutral position is referred to as the type 2 or non-neutral impairment. For example, T3 and 4 is said to be FRS, which is flexed, rotated and the side bend right when it is limited in the opposite direction, like extension, rotation and side bending to the left. Conversely, L4 and 5 is said to the ERS, extended, rotated and side bend left when it is limited in flexion, rotation and side bending to the right. These one segment motion impairments may not be easily seen on the spinal radiograph, but can be readily diagnosed through motion analysis. That's the end of the discussion of our lecture, which is spinal movement, joint movement. So that's it for today's lecture, guys. Thank you.